to the death, his right to do everything he does. The thing that I find unusual, and it's, you know, it's not a criticism so much, but his targets are underdogs. And comedy traditionally has picked on people in power, people who abuse their power. Women and gays and immigrants are kind of, to my way of thinking, underdogs. And, you know, he ought to be careful because he's Jewish. And a lot of the people who want to pick on these kind of groups, the Jews are on that list a little further. You got women, gays, gypsies, blah, 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 and then suddenly you find Jews. And
suddenly Andrew's arrested.
Yeah, so, you know, I mean, obviously he should do what he wants. And
why does he get away with it, do you think, then? Well, we have never laughed at jokes about the
Well,
poor.
he's appealing. I think he's appealing largely. I think his core audience are young white males who are threatened by these groups. I think a lot of these guys aren't sure of their manhood because that's a problem when you're going in through adolescence. You know, am I really? Could I be? I hope I'm not one of them. And the women who assert themselves and are competent are a threat to these men, and so are immigrants in terms of jobs and the
So that's why we as an audience then will laugh.
You say we. I don't think you're.
No.
But I think you're
collective we.
I think that's what is at the core of that experience that takes place in these arenas. Is a certain, you know, a sharing of anger and rage at these targets. And I'm sure Andrew isn't that angry at them. I'm sure he's playing it as a comic.
The difference is that Maher is transparently trying to dunk and humiliate Muslims as a group, just using humor as a tool for that, except it's just not funny. That's the difference. Would be a Republican today, by the way. Yeah, I know. A lot of people consistently say that George Carlin would be a Republican, and it's like, I think they genuinely have not understood a single thing, a single George Carlin joke ever, if they say something like that. It's just like, I think, was it Zay Squirrel who found... I think it was Squirrel who found a George Carlin bit that even I hadn't seen. I don't even think it was a bit. It was just him talking about how he's like a Marxist. I unfortunately think Carlin would have definitely fell for the cancel culture shit, unfortunately. No, I think he would have been like Bill Burr. I think he would have been exactly like Bill Burr. Like, light commentary on cancel culture overall, but oftentimes just like completely moving away from that because he recognizes it as like a hacky thing. He was not a Marxist? No, he himself referred to himself as a Marxist, I believe.
You began a sentence a little while ago with it's not a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise that rich white men don't care about poor black people, period. So they're not high on their list. They're not high on their list.
George, I love you, George, but that's nonsense.
I don't care if you love me or not. They're not high on the conscious or the subconscious list of those people who are in charge of things in this country. The owners, forget these foolish elections, the owners of this country don't care about the poor in general.
I'm telling you, if you don't believe me, is this Karl Marx talking to me? The owners of this country are the voters of this country.
You're wrong about that, my friend.
Aren't the owners of this country the voters in this country who elected George Bush?
No, they're not. Listen, politics, these elections are a charade. It is a charade.
Okay.
They are meant to... Well, I'll tell you, just listen for a minute. Learn a little something. The elections and politicians are in place in order to give Americans the illusion that they have freedom of choice. You don't really have choice in this country.
Well, and let me ask you this about the looting. Would you agree that there was two kinds of looting? That there was the kind where people were desperate because they were starving and maybe were taking food out of a store, and then there were some people who were taking stereo equipment.
Yeah.
Would you agree that there was two kinds of looting?
Yeah, people were walking away with television sets.
Would you agree that there was those two kinds of looting?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then is it not wrong for the president to issue an ultimatum that there was zero tolerance and thereby encourage his right...
Dude, by the way, that's Bill Maher talking about post-Katrina and ripping into George W. Bush and saying, well, there's people who are looting for survival, so why are you saying zero tolerance? You can see the hint of like reactionary liberalism here, okay? You can see the hint of that, where he's like, well, there's two kinds of looting. And it's like who cares? These guys are straight up like trying to survive a hurricane, okay? But beyond that, they're also trying to survive crippling poverty in general. When you need to, for example, rebuild your house, you're going to need money. How do you get that money when you have already never had money? Well, you're going to sell that stereo, okay? So it's just like, even in that regard, there's something to be said about precisely this kind of looting. But notice how my man here is against, he's positioned himself as a contrarian against George W. Bush. So he's, of course, saying like, well, you know, if there's two different types of looting, well, why are we criticizing all kind of looting?
Wing flax in the liberal media to go ahead and say this gives us light.
Your best take is, would you steal a bread or a stereo when stereo buys you 20 loaves of bread? Yes. My other take on that is that, you know, a Gucci bag also pays for rent. And you need to pay for rent if you have a house. You're in an apartment, you got to be able to pay for rent. Not just about bread, okay? It's not just about loaves of bread. We're no longer living in a feudal society, okay? This isn't like Oliver Twist. Why is bro having me agree with ethical crime?
License to suggest that we shoot people on sight as if in the middle of this crisis where so many people are dying already, what we need to do is shoot Tyrone because he's getting out of Circuit City with some soggy tweeters. And
yeah, I mean, the racism jumped out again. It's just like, he's always been an intolerant, relatively reactionary liberal. You know what I mean? God, he's so smug. He's so smug.
And I think Tyrone always had soggy tweeters, quite frankly.
I have an addendum to that. The real looting in this country takes place in the transfer of the wealth from the poor to the rich. I'm sorry that you don't like class and the truth, my friend, but you're just stuck with it. Class and truth. And the poor have been systematically looted in this country. The rich have been made richer under this criminal, fascist president and his government.
You know, George, I think do you know what fascism is?
Fascism,
you know what fascism
when it comes
is?
to America,
you know what Nazis are?
No, wait, sir, wait, sir. When fascism comes to America, it will not be in brown and black shirts. It will not be with jack boots. It will be Nike sneakers and smiley shirts. Smiley. The fascism. Germany lost the Second World War. Fascism won it. Believe me, my friend.
Fascism.
That's a classic. There's a classic take. And it's true. It's 100% true. Neoliberalism is a continuation of a different kind of fascism. It's not, you know, the nationalistic mythos always that you see in Germany.
Is when corporations become the government.
Yes.
And that's sort of what we have. And poverty has gone up. So 17.
Get this straight. George, you think that looting is looting okay if there's no hurricane?
First of all, property.
Can you break into tweeters whenever you want?
We're talking about.
I have no problem with theft. May I be honest with you?
Problem with
I have no problem with theft. It's true.
But wait.
Dude, yeah, by the way, the same people that say like George Carlin would be a reactionary conservative today, he would be a right-winger today. Remember, I'm saying the exact same things. Those guys will listen to George Carlin and go, oh, man, God, I love him. I love him. When I say it, they're like, oh, dude, I can't believe you're pro-crime. That's crazy.
Wait a sec. We're talking looting. We're not saying, you know, this reminds me of the O.J. situation. It wasn't that O.J. was innocent. We all knew he killed his wife. Okay? It's not that looting is good. We all know looting is bad. It's the priorities. It's the fact that white people obsessed on one black guy getting away with a crime once when it had worked in reverse 1 billion times more. The same way they're obsessing about a few people getting away in the middle of this much bigger crisis. It's a matter of what's proportional. I think that's what we're saying about looting. No one is defending looting. Well, when you say, I don't care what that is always what these kind of commentators say. I don't care what their race is, as if things were even to be.
Guys, come on. This is George W. Bush era liberalism, baby. Listen, I remember this, okay? I was a young boy who was very weirdly into politics and very invested into politics, okay? So I remember George W. Bush era liberalism from Turkey, okay? Watching it from Turkey, Jon Stewart specifically, okay? And let me tell you, this is Bush era liberalism. This doesn't exist in the Democratic Party anymore. You kind of saw a little bit of it under Donald Trump, a little bit of it. But the reality is Bush era liberalism and the post 9/11 world has completely subsided. The Democratic Party is absolutely just as violent, and the reception of the Democratic Party's inherently violent actions, whether it be its foreign policy, whether it be its maintenance of the borders and the continuation of white nativist immigration, restrictive immigration policies, all of those things are no longer perceived in the Democratic Party as like a ridiculous thing that the Democratic Party shouldn't be on board with. There are, we've lost that. Everybody goes, oh, you're, even in the online spaces, they go, oh, you're tanky. Think about it. These are supposed to be some of the most, these are the progressives online, right? Progressives online. They're not even at MSNBC, right? They're supposed to be some of the most progressive people in America. They're not supposed to be beholden to the same material interests that like MSNBC is, right? They're supposed to offer you a different perspective that you don't get on television. And yet so many liberals who adorn the radical aesthetics, okay, who adorn the radical aesthetics, who are lifestylists, who then unconditionally take on the most reactionary, most pro-war positions. The vast majority seem to think that the Democratic Party still is what you just explained. Yeah, sure. That's it. It's the Democratic Party saying, well, at least we believe in climate change, and then continuing along with like only marginally a little bit better policies when it comes to combating climate change. Or maybe having genuine differences in the way to combat climate change, but absolutely agreeing unconditionally in other ways of continuing anthropogenic climate change, like opening up new oil facilities, right, and new permits. Yeah.
So I have solved this little political dilemma for myself in a very simple way. On election day, I stay home. I don't vote. Fuck them. Fuck them. I don't vote. Two reasons I don't vote. First of all, it's meaningless. This country was bought and sold and paid for a long time ago. The shit they shuffle around.
Look at him. He's a tanky. He's a tanky, anti-electoralist tanky. Which, like, as a political commentator, I don't even necessarily agree with this take, but it doesn't matter.
Every 4 years doesn't mean a fucking thing. And secondly, I don't vote because I believe if you vote, you have no right to complain. People like to twist that around. I know. They say, well, if you don't vote, you have no right to complain. But where's the logic in that? If you vote and you elect dishonest, incompetent people, and they get into office and screw everything up, well, you are responsible for what they have done. You caused the problem. You voted them in. You have no right to complain. I, on the other hand, who did not vote, who in fact did not even leave the house on election day, am in no way responsible for what these people have done and have every right to complain as loud as I want about the mess you created that I had nothing to do with. So I know that a little later on this year you're going to have another one of those really swell presidential elections that you like so much. You'll enjoy yourselves. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm sure as soon as the election is over, your country will improve immediately. As for me, I'll be home on that day doing essentially the same thing as you. The only difference is when I get finished masturbating, I'm going to have a little something to show for it, folks. Thank you very much.
Anyway. Here.
But I've never been comfortable with, because I'm at heart a lefty. You know, if I fell out of an airplane, I would land on the left side of that line. You know the difference that I define the difference between right wing and left wing. People to the right of center. Well, let's start with the people to the left. People to the left of center, liberals, Democrats, populists. They're interested in people, human beings.
Listen, left, right doesn't matter. At the middle of the hour, at the top of the hour, you see a 3-minute ad break, okay? You could be a George Carlin fan. You could be a George Carlin hater. At this very moment, you're going to see an ad break unless you subscribe. I forgot to run it earlier. That's why I'm giving you a silly segue here, not a very good one, okay? Here is the 3-minute ad break now.
Beings and human values. People to the right of the line, Republicans and rich people and right-wingers, they're interested in property. Property, not people. And they're soulless. They're without soul. They don't really care. They don't really care. These Christians don't do Jesus' work, which is to feed the poor and take care of the ones who can't help themselves. That's what their Jesus said. Feed those who have no way. To take ones who have nothing going for them. Help them in my name. Don't even want to know about it. Where's that tax return? I want my what do they call it? The rebate. It's goofy. It's just.
Wasn't even what I was looking for. There's more, I think. Here. Remember, this isn't. He's not being a comedian here, by the way. In a lot of these instances, he's not. He's just straight up talking about his ideology, his worldview, the way he sees how the world operates.
They're out in the open now. They're out in the open now. They're not even.
Oh God, Twitter videos.
For one thing, you have to give them credit. They're out in the open now. They're out in the open now. They're not even.
Oh God, we're not gonna be able to watch this, I don't think. Does anyone have a more reputable and better video website, like a video hosting service, where we could potentially watch this video instead of just...
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please...
Instead of watching...
Comedian is.
Oh, this is it, yeah.
Okay. Comedian, his newest book, Napalm and Silly Putty, is #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. The man who made Harry Potter cry. George Carlin, ladies and gentlemen. There you are. Hello, Thank you. Hi, Robert. How do you do, Howard? How are you doing? Good to see you. Okay. Last week, paper front page, Bush picks industry insiders to fill environmental posts.
Oh my God, wait, is that RFK?
Mining industry lobbyist is the number 2 at the Interior Department. A lobbyist for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association is the chief lawyer. The number 2 at the Environmental Protection Agency, a lobbyist for Monsanto, the chemical company now devoted to agribusiness. The chairman of the Council on Economic Equality, a lawyer who represented General Electric in its fight with the EPA over toxic waste sites.
I can't tell. It's so... Someone said Ralph Nader. I don't think that's Ralph Nader. What?
In our panel, he is one of the most...
This is really... It's really deep fried. It's like hard to see.
Tailgate party. What they're talking... There you are. Hello, Thank you. Hi, Robert. How do you do, Howard? How are you doing? Good to see you. Okay. Thank you. All right. Now, people are getting tired of me talking about George Bush and the environment, but it's not me. It's George Bush. Every week, it just gets worse. Newsweek said last week the Bush administration is homecoming week for the energy industry.
It's Robert Shapiro?
And Dick Cheney's task force report is the pregame tailgate party. What they're talking about is Bush, last week paper, front page, Bush picks industry insiders to fill environmental posts. A mining industry lobbyist is the number 2 at the Interior Department. A lobbyist for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association is the chief lawyer. The number 2 at the Environmental Protection Agency, a lobbyist for Monsanto, the chemical company now devoted to agribusiness. The chairman of the Council on Economic Equality, a lawyer who represented General Electric in its fight with the EPA over toxic waste sites. Folks, to say the fox is guarding the hen house, to say that the Nazis are running the Nuremberg trials, to say that the candy man is the dentist, the Corleone family is the head of the gambling commission here. I mean, it's obscene.
Bill, back to earth, please.
At least
what
back
we
to
now
earth.
have, what we now have are people who are competent in the fields that they are working on. You know more. We now know more about environmental responsibility.
Because they're used to evading them.
Because they understand.
That's the...
Yeah, you have to give them credit for one thing. You have to give them credit. They're out in the open now. They're out in the open now. They're not even trying to conceal it anymore. The owners of the country they got their election. They said, we're going to get this election. We put you people in that court for a reason.
All right,
Now's
back
the time
to
pay
earth
us.
for you now.
Yeah, forget all that stupid. Will you? They're out in the open. They're openly driving the bus, and we're all in the back.
There is no national conspiracy to buy elections and control America. Now
Talk about back to earth.
That's part of the problem. That's part of the problem that we have, is that people make these kind of irrational statements.
Unfortunately, George Bush has the right to put anyone he wants in his cabinet. It's our shame on us for electing him.
You're right.
Shame on you.
That's right.
Shame on everyone who voted for Ralph Nader. We can thank Ralph.
Oh, blame it on Ralph Nader. Right.
Why?
Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders. The Bernie Sanders of the past. Got a screenshot of you out of the chair. Get ready for a week of hell. Thank you. Oh, so sick. The Nader bros are responsible. Everybody knows it.
Everyone who voted for him blew the election, and everyone said Gore and Bush.
Al Gore blew the election because he was so afraid that Monica Lewinsky. Never mind.
No, he was too afraid to have President Clinton, who was popular at that time.
But he would have been better than this, and he would have protected the environment.
I don't challenge the facts that you present, that those backgrounds are there. What I challenge is the idea that there's some kind of conspiracy about
now
this.
I get to talk.
What we don't have, what we haven't had, let me just make this quick point. What we haven't had is a serious question about what to do with all of the energy needs that we have in America. A bunch of liberals want to tell people, you can't drive this car, you can't have these lights on, you can't have a swimming pool. That's the attitude of people who don't understand what business.
I love how nothing changes in America. Nothing. Reactionary conservatives still talk about how all liberals care about is like limiting our freedoms. I want to be able to have the pool. I want to be able to have the lights on. I want to have the gas stove. And then the Democrats are like, well, you know, the system works, but it's just the problem is you didn't vote for the right person and you didn't vote hard enough. And then Bill Maher, surprisingly, of course, is a little bit more critical of the Democratic Party here, where he says, no, it's actually Al Gore's fault, which is true. Right? And the left is in the room is like, no, they're both sold. They're both bought and sold by corporations. These are like, politics is a song and dance. Sure, there's like marginal differences and disagreements along the way, but ultimately they are operating for the same masters.
You know what you can have now? You can have gas for $3 a gallon. You can be in California and have blackouts all the time. Right. Because of these energy policies.
And I love this.
even blackouts, rolling blackouts. I mean, I guess like maybe back then it might have been real, but it's not real now, and yet they still say
the energy policies that were created here in California, not as a result of a conspiracy, but because...
You don't need a formal conspiracy when interests converge. These people went to the same universities and fraternities. They're on the same boards of directors. They're in the same country.
He's right. This is the most succinct way of describing how capitalism works. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's people conspiring because they have the same interests. They come from the same class. They have the same class positions. They have the same class interests. And therefore, they operate with the same purpose. They don't have to go and learn capitalism. They live in it. It's the normal system. It's the way of existence. It was real then. PG&E has been doing wildfires for 20 odd years.
Country club.
Oh no, the rolling blackouts are not due to like an energy crisis. It's due to the fact that yes, there are wildfires. If that's what you're talking about, that's entirely different. These guys are making it seem like there's rolling blackouts as a consequence of like an energy crisis.
They have like interest. They don't need to call a meeting. They know what's good for them, and they're getting it. And there used to be 7 oil companies. There are now 3. It will soon be 2. The things that matter in this country have been reduced in choice. There are 2 political parties. There are a handful of insurance companies. There are about 6 or 7 information things. But if you want a bagel, there are 23 flavors because you have the illusion. You have the illusion of choice. Right. You don't
I've never seen this video, but goddamn, he's spitting.
The real important choice. There's no freedom of choice.
That's a great point. Right. And speaking of $3 a gallon for gasoline, which may finally, as to address your point, wake people up, and you're right. I have no sympathy, as I said last week, for the little guy. Because the little guy...
How can you guys say I'm wrong for saying I should have never admitted to like being Marxist or socialist? Okay? When, like, if you look at all the old Carlin clips, he's just, I say almost damn near verbatim identical things, but because I get slapped with the socialist sticker, they look back at him with great reverence and say he's the GOAT, and look at me now and say, you're wrong, you're a socialist communist, you want murder, death, and destruction, you suck. The very same people that hold him to such a high regard will get mad at me for saying the exact same, sometimes even damn near verbatim identical things.
Like that. That was right, exactly. Because he doesn't care. He's never conserved. Well, he drives an SUV, and he doesn't think...
You're talking about 2 different groups of people? No, I'm talking about the exact same people who fancy themselves to be, like, liberal. Or sometimes even right-wingers. Right-wingers like Carlin, too. They think that he would be a right-winger. People like this comedy. I don't know if they like this politics. George Carlin's comedy is his politics.
This through. Okay, $3 a gallon for gasoline. What did Bush say about it last week? We can't really help you, but if you passed my tax cut, that'll give you the money to pay for that $3. Hey, George, why don't you just cut out the middleman and cut the check right to Exxon?
Yes, yeah.
That's right.
And it's the voter.
Oh, Bill, that sounds so cool.
Well, that's what he's saying.
That sounds so cool, but how is it that it's fair for you to say that the little guy doesn't know any better if he wants to drive an SUV? It's his right to drive a SUV.
No,
if you want to run your computer at home on the internet and you want to keep it on for 8 hours and pay the bill, it's your right to do that. That's what it means to live in a free society.
If we had public transportation,
no one wants public transportation for themselves. It's for the other guy.
No, people do want it.
Put him on the bus.
And
Make him ride across
People would
town.
like to drive vehicles that get more than 10 miles to a gallon, but they can't buy them.
Vehicles that get that's flatly not true.
But you speak...
The Volkswagen diesel Beetle. The Volkswagen diesel Beetle gets 45 miles to the gallon. People don't want that. They don't want to buy it.
But
they
you
want
speak as if we live in a world of infinite resources, which we don't.
No, but we don't live in a world where we need greater coercion by the government telling you.
Of course we do.
Oh, so lame. So bad. And there's a part 2 on this as well, I guess. I don't know if I want to watch the whole thing. Famously, Volkswagen never lied about their...
Have this. You can't live there.
Of course we do. Dick Cheney said last week we don't need to conserve.
We need to go up to the Arctic and get in there.
Why? Because there's no money in conservation.
Now, if you really, like me, were concerned about the little guy, you would say, since we can explore the Arctic without destroying the area, we ought to make
just drill a few holes
available.
How can you do it without destroying?
Bird species,
since
really,
the 80s, and we haven't had the problem. In fact,
We
the
haven't had
biggest,
any problems with the environment since the
oil
80s?
spills that we have had have come from tankers.
Why don't we find the last snow leopard and drill right into him?
You know what's really interesting about all this? It's like, I feel like old Billy Boy, okay? Old Billy Boy and like the things he's defending right now, if old Billy Boy was coming up against new Billy Boy, okay? New Billy Boy would be like, oh, shut up. You're so stupid. Stop. You don't understand how the world works. People don't get it. You don't get it. That's what he would do.
Maybe we could get oil right out of the endangered species themselves.
I just think you liberals ought to admit, we want to tell you we got a new national nanny, and we're going to tell you when you can keep your lights on, what kind of vehicles you can drive, how you can get to work, what hours you can keep. Just tell us you're going to control us, and that would cut the middleman out, too.
You frame it as if that's fascism.
That is.
But in a world of limited resources.
In a free society.
Yeah, like, dude. Instituting a racial hierarchy with an in-group that is dominant and dominating an out-group that you dehumanize, that's not fascism. Fascism is when the government implements policies that mitigate harmful impact that we have on the environment. That's the real fascism, not fascism in the way that you understand it, and as like a political ideology, as a way that the government operates. That's not fascism. It's fascism when the government does stuff. But of course, stuff that I don't like. Fascism is when the government does stuff that I don't like, and it's actually not fascism when it does stuff that I do like.
You should be...
For people who pretend to be leaders to tell us, you know what, conservation, not really a good idea.
They didn't say
Building
that.
more
Yes,
power.
They did not say that. What they did say was having the government come in and tell you what you can do is not the policy that they would embrace.
So having the oil companies and the corporations and the boards of directors tell us what we can do.
You are not required to buy an SUV.
Business should run
You're not required to run your electricity. You're not required. There are a number of things that you have control.
The government is supposed to create rules, laws, and regulation specifically targeting the dumbest person in mind, okay? You know that old saying, you're just as good as the weakest person on the team, okay? That's how a country operates in the most reductive terms. That's why we have seatbelt laws, right? Because not every single person is going to want to put on a seatbelt. Okay, a lot of people are going to go, that's restrictive. I don't want to do that. I actually don't want to do that at all, which is why sometimes you have to enforce seatbelt laws. Okay, this doesn't mean that every kind of regulation and rule that the government puts forward is always going to be good, moral, and preventative of further harm. But that's the same principle behind vaccinations, mass vaccination campaigns. There are going to be plenty of people who say, I don't want to get vaccinated. George Carlin himself was a bit of an anti-vaxxer, as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken. He was a bit of a granola anarchist in that regard, right? And it's like, you do that, and you try to enforce mass inoculation rules because you know people are just going to go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get a boo-boo. Okay? I'm scared of getting a boo-boo. That's why the nanny state has to kick in order to ensure that our hospitals are not overflowing. Did I bring the food or what? What's going on here?
control
How
over.
can you run a home without
Point here is-
electricity?
What's that?
How can you run your home without electricity?
I figured out when I got my bill back in February that was 3 times the size. I went to the master block and knocked off a number of those items because I didn't want to have to pay the electricity.
Okay,
But I made the choice.
I got to take a commercial before they turn the lights off. All right, I want to... Let's do it. I don't know if you are aware of this book. It is the #1 bestseller. Yours is going to be #1 next week. But
this one, that's USA Today, I think.
Okay, right. This has sold 4.1 million copies. The Prayer of Jabez. If you haven't heard about what this is, you'll appreciate this. W.C. Fields, you know this story? When he was on his deathbed, he was a famous atheist. One of the few people like us who was willing to say he was not too fond of religion or children. But anyway, he was, and he was looking at a Bible. His best friend walked in and said, "Bill, what are you doing with the Bible?" And he said, "Looking for loopholes."
Yes.
Well, they found one. I bring this up because they found a loophole in the Bible, the Prayer of Jabez. It's buried in the book of Chronicles, and the prayer says, "Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory." So this has sold 4 million copies because people are buying it who, one, think that prayer works. You know, if you say to God, you petition him. And also, but what's so cynical and awful about this is that they're praying for self-aggrandizement. This is a prayer that says, enlarge my territory, make me rich, give me stuff. Is this not?
I think if it was praying for sex, it might be something worthwhile.
But people do pray for sex. They just don't talk about it. People are going to pray for wealth. Well, I don't see the problem with the book. I mean, I understand. I don't think children should be having to read that in school, but I think there's nothing wrong with praying for self-aggrandizement. People do it anyway.
But what is the point
We're lowly human beings. We pray for all kinds of things.
I'm told by people who pray, I say to them, suppose God doesn't answer your prayer. And they say, well, then it's his will. I will accept his will. Then what is the point of praying in the first place if he's going to do what he wants to anyway? There's supposedly a divine plan. Well, how are you so arrogant as to ask him to change his plan for some narrow reason, whether it's health or wealth? I mean,
because we are arrogant. We all think the world revolves around us.
But do you think prayer works? I mean, I pray to Joe Pesci.
I don't believe in...
I pray to Joe Pesci, and I get the same results. I get the same results I used to get from God when I was 9 years old, and I believed in the invisible man in the sky. You get about half the things you pray for. It's laws of probability. Half the things you pray for you get, half of them you don't. You write off the half you don't. The half you get, you say, oh, isn't he great? And it's just a game. It's a form of mental illness.
No,
I just don't want the lightning to hit me.
Look, relax. Try to relax. Try to relax.
Pray for me.
So you think God would throw a lightning bolt at you also?
I think, listening to what I just heard, as insulting as that is to millions of people
will he strike me dead right now? Will he? He doesn't dare.
You know what? Pray now.
He doesn't dare. He doesn't dare. He doesn't care.
I think it's so much more. I mean, I believe in God. I think you
believe in God.
Of course I do. I just give him so much more credit than you do. It's insulting. Any supreme being. It's so insulting to think that he's up there reading these petitions. Please give me a real estate business.
A Mercedes.
A Mercedes. I mean, that's insulting.
But that's your interpretation.
That's what they're praying for.
That's what the book says. Prayer should be for peace, for family, for health, for...
Why should we...
I'm using plastic utensils because I hate the environment.